welcome to Diverse Conversations with Ashka Patel. I'm so glad that you have decided to join me back again. It's been a while since we have last connected. A lot has happened and a lot is happening as we meet and connect again in the field of healthcare technology. And it is my immense pleasure to bring back a continuation of a series that I had started last year, which is exploring the future of healthcare technology, a field that is very close to me and something that I'm very curious about as I learn, and I wish to share these learnings with you. Prior to beginning my podcast, I just wanted to put a disclaimer out there that the views, opinions, thoughts, perceptions expressed in this podcast by me or my guest are solely our own personal opinions and are not to be a representation of our employers, organizations, affiliations, or any other groups that we may be affiliated with. These are solely our own personal opinions and thoughts. And with that, I would like to, yes, it's none other than Dr. Amit Sawant. Amit is a proven award-winning customer-centric leader with extensive experience in enterprise and consumer space at Somatics, Dell, Riverbed, NetApp, and TCS, with a strong track record of delivering groundbreaking products in the areas of data analytics, AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data management, and software as a service, and security. He has an exceptional ability to translate concepts into reality through thought leadership, collaboration, and negotiation skills. He also serves as an adjunct faculty, consultant, startup advisor, leadership mentor, and a career coach. He holds an M.B.A. from the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, and a Ph.D. and Master's of Science in Computer Science from North Carolina State University. It is my immense pleasure to welcome Amit, for him to take this time out to have this conversation, because with his role at Somatics, I am just very excited to share the insights that he has shared with me through our conversation. So here we go. Welcome to Diverse Conversations. This is Ashka Patel, and as I mentioned, we have an amazing guest waiting in the waiting room right here with us, Dr. Amit Sawant. Amit works with Somatics in a role which he will actually talk about more, because the work that he's doing at Somatics is very interesting. Somatics offers some really interesting services, and I think this is the first time we're featuring such a guest on our podcast. So with that, Amit, I'll pass it over to you. If you could please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your role at Somatics and, just what do you do?
Hey, Aska, thanks for the introduction. Really excited to be here and to talk a little bit about Somatics and what we are doing here. My name is Amit Sawant. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area. I am the Chief Product and Business Officer at Somatics, which is a big data analytics company in the health tech space. So we have built an AI-powered remote patient monitoring platform that uses wearables. We have built our own wearable device, but our technology can work on any of the commercially available smart bands, smart watches. And what we have done is we collect data passively on people's wrists. The current use cases that we are going after is elderly patients, either in nursing homes, assisted independent living facilities, outpatient settings at hospitals. And we collect this data 24/7 passively without any intervention. And based on the data that we collect, we provide clinical insights to the healthcare providers, to the caregivers of these patients. So that's been what we, like an amazing work that I've been part of. I've been with the company for about a year and a half. So my role here at Somatics is to work on the product and the business strategy. How is it that we can commercialize, scale the growth of the company, take it to newer heights? So that's something I've been super excited about. In my earlier part of my career, it was more around, not to geek out too much here, but was more so around quality of service as to how is it that you can, from a networking storage perspective, improve the quality of data and whatnot. But now I'm working on something where I work on quality of life, improving quality of life. So that's been an amazing journey. So that's sort of what our mission is at Somatics, is to improve patient lives using technology in a cost-effective manner.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that kind of, it does put that, that Master's of Science and PhD in Computer Science with the M.B.A. And this is what, this is the culmination of that product where you're able to bring those strengths together to truly, help patients achieve a good quality of life. And I think the work that you're doing at Somatics is very important because as we know, home care is becoming now the new hub of where healthcare is provided, right? Like the trends are where we're moving slowly into the patient's homes to provide healthcare services to them. And I can see how remote monitoring would be of such an important part of delivering that care to patients within their home care settings. So with that, I think what I wanted to start off, let's start off that conversation. Remote monitoring is gaining momentum. Where do you see the future of remote monitoring for patients going, and where does Somatics fit into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if anything, this pandemic has really accelerated the adoption of technology in the healthcare and the health tech space. Traditionally, healthcare has been slow in terms of adopting new technology, but unfortunately, COVID has played that accelerator right now in terms of adopting new technology. And this is where I think that, coupled with the fact that there are these shortage of staff and all of these things that have really come together in a way that has enabled the healthcare providers to adopt new technology. And this is where I think remote patient monitoring really plays a vital role as to how is it that you can take care of the patients and improve their quality of life. So rather than having to manually go and look at the patients, more often than not, is there a way that we can passively monitor the patient and have the interventions only when that is absolutely needed, and that is during the point of care? So, and remote patient monitoring really helps in that scenario, right? So this is what we have been excited about. So like at Somatics, we used a novel gesture-based detection technology to identify what a patient is doing, what a person is doing, whether they are drinking, sleeping, walking. So just purely using the wearable and their hand motions. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine, like as I'm moving my hand, it's changing sort of that 3D space vector, right? So this is something that we are collecting. This data is something that we are collecting and calibrating, whether is this a motion of somebody taking a sip, taking, sort of a cup from hand to mouth, taking a sip, putting it down. And this is what we have done. That is collected all of this data. We have run a lot of pilots to identify whether this motion is a drinking motion or not. And we can not only calibrate whether a person is drinking, but how much did a person sort of that liquid intake. We can quantify that liquid intake as well. So you can imagine, if we collect this data over a period of time, we can identify whether is a person at a risk of dehydration or not. So that's something that we do from a predictive analytics perspective. Eating disorders, this is something that we are also working towards. The UTI risk analysis. So all of the data that we collect passively 24/7, you can apply predictive analytics on top of that and provide those clinical insights to the healthcare providers. So that's where I think remote patient monitoring technology has really played an important part in not necessarily replacing the staff that the healthcare providers or the caregivers, nurses that are taking care of the patients, but it acts synergistically. That is, it complements the work that they are already doing. But now with this RPM technology as part of their toolkit, they can focus on other critical aspects of how is it that they can take better care of the patients. So if anything, remote patient monitoring has not only improved the quality of the patients, but it has also improved the empathy that these healthcare providers have towards their patients. So I think it has overall played a pretty positive role in improving the quality of care, both for the patients and the healthcare providers that they are taking care of their patients.
Absolutely, I would agree on that, and I think the information that you're sharing, and I'm trying to process and analyze because it's just like such amazing like information that I'm like, it's not something that I'm very familiar with, but I'm learning as we talk. And you know, I have so many questions. I will get to them very soon. But
Sure.
I think what it like the picture that is painting in my head as we're having this discussion is, you know, the technology that you're providing with the hand gestures and the wearables and everything else. It's more like, you know, you're creating opportunities for just-in-time contact with those passive data analyzed. You know, you're allowing, you know, for us to study trends of what a patient is doing, and then, you know, what are those interventions that would actually lead to outcomes that we want to, instead of unnecessarily. Sometimes, you know, sometimes we do an overkill. Sometimes we are not able to truly assess a patient because we don't understand the full picture of a patient. But I think gaining this information really helps, because then you're able to pull all those pieces together. As you said, dehydration, urinary tract infection, where is the chain, what's the linkage, right? And with that, I guess I'm just curious, because you spoke of a lot.
So if I may just add one point to this, you know, like the shift that we are trying to do is moving from curing to caring, and from there to being more proactive. So trying to get into more individualized care and preventative care, rather than sort of something as a reactionary step. So that's sort of that paradigm shift that we are looking towards, is how is it that we can move from a reactive sort of care to a more preventative sort of care. And this eventually leads to decrease in the overall, you know, like the healthcare cost as well. And that's something that we have seen out in the market.
Absolutely. And I mean, you hit quite a few points, because in labor shortage, staff shortage, we know it's a reality in healthcare. Like, you know, healthcare providers are exhausted because of like the increased burden of care that has been on their shoulders during the pandemic. And, you know, we know that there's a major shift happening where healthcare workforce is sometimes choosing not to return back to their workplaces because of the burden that was placed onto their shoulders. So I think having technology support those functions will alleviate some of that burden, and maybe, you know, it might just maybe open up opportunities for healthcare providers to truly practice to their scope, rather than having to then go around, you know, completing logistical and administrative tasks rather, and truly focus on that intervention and that interaction with the patient more so than anything else, right? So that's okay. I'm glad that I'm understanding this correctly, because with that, my next question. So you had spoken to providing remote monitoring services. So how does that, and you had mentioned about, you know, us being more preventative in our approach to patient care, rather than more treatment approach, and being it more individualized. So where is the future of, you know, virtual services and the provisional of professional services? Because a lot of the times patients will go to a physician. That's the expectation, right? Like they will go to a pharmacy, will go to a physician to seek those services. But now with remote monitoring, how's that changing?
Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, there will be, at least from my point of view, I see that there will be some sort of a change, but not a replacement to, hey, yeah, just because now we have remote patient monitoring, you're wearing this wearable, you know, like we can identify your signs of decline or deterioration in your health. If anything, that will sort of paint a holistic picture, sort of a continuous picture, if you will, in terms of whether a person's health is improving or declining through their activities of daily living. So, you know, like sort of the data that we collect. And if anything, that's gonna provide that holistic picture to the healthcare provider, to the physician, to the nurse, rather than them having to purely rely on the episodic readings as to, hey, now is the time for a doctor visit, maybe a yearly visit or a 6-month visit, and then you collect all of these, you know, like vitals, and then based on that, you make some sort of decisions. But if you can complement that along with this 24/7 continuous passive data that you're collecting for a patient, I think sort of the decisions, the prognosis that you could make could be very rich. And that's what I foresee, that it is going to help with that, you know, that preventative care and overall lead to better outcomes for the patient.
That's thank you. So and that's like the future of remote monitoring. Obviously, you had also mentioned Somatics works with the wearables, and where is the future of wearables heading? Because I think it's still a very new concept. Where it's not that new, but like I think it's now just gaining mainstream attention.
Right, right, and like thanks to the early smart bands, smart watches that came out in the market. Like the Fitbits of the world, which probably came out like maybe 6-8 years ago or something. If anything, that has broken that barrier of adoption with people in general. That, oh, you know what? Yes, it is not sort of something that I have to worry about. The data gets collected passively. So, but it was still at a very an athletic option, if you will, rather than looking at it from a healthcare or a health tech lens. But still, the adoption of that has broken that barrier in terms of at least the use cases that we are going after, like the elderly people that, oh, you know what? Yeah, there have been Fitbits that people have been using. So I can use this. I know this is mainly targeted towards the health tech space, but that has improved the adoption with people. And also sort of the other few things that we have been working on, and I've seen, like some of the other competitors out in the market have been working on is, like today we can monitor whether a person is sleeping, walking, drinking through all of these IoT sensors that are part of these wearables, right? Yes. The accelerometer, the gyroscope, but now also in our next generation smart band, we are including PPG optical sensors that will collect data, like the heart rate data, SpO2 data, skin temperature data. It will also have a barometer, so you can, today we also do fall detection, whether it's a person is falling, is at a risk of falling or not. With some additional sensors, you can increase the sensitivity and specificity of the algorithms that we are developing that provide those clinical insights. So sort of the future of these wearables or smart bands, I see that you'll have a clinic on the wrist through these wearables. That coupled with all of the other capabilities that we already provide with our smart bands, you can have this single pane of glass view of a patient's health in terms of, is this person at a risk of dehydration, falling risk, sort of UTI risk, whether is this person has some sort of eating disorders. So bringing all of these sensors and technology into a single platform will help us take better care of the patients and ultimately result in better outcomes for the patients. So currently, with our current generation smart band, we use Bluetooth, like BLE technology to push the data from the smart band to the phone and then push the data into the cloud where, like we have our backend database. Now in our next gen band, we'll also have Wi-Fi capabilities. So you don't need to have your smartphone act as that gateway, but just right from the smart band, you can push the data directly into the cloud using Wi-Fi. So these are a few interesting trends that I see in the market, and for us to go and tap into the market. Right now, there isn't a single market leader in this space. It's a very fragmented market. So there's a lot of opportunity to be grabbed and market share to attain. And that's where we see a lot of technology companies getting into this space as well, along with these telco providers.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you have truly opened my perception of how I see technology contributing into healthcare. And I think we're just getting started into this revolution of health tech. I think we're in the infancy of it, and moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll truly realize and maybe identify a direction in terms of where we want to go with this technology, because it would have matured by then, and truly, like, we would have good, rich data to understand the impact it has on not just the short-term but long-term outcomes as well. But and you have already touched to some of these as well as you were sharing that information. But I also wanted to understand. So like when we step away from the remote monitoring piece, but like just some trends like that you're seeing within health tech and where do you see, and how do you see those impacting our patients in the future, just from the health tech perspective overall?
Yeah, sure. So sort of a couple of trends that I see, like wearables, we talked about that for quite a bit. I also see AR, VR playing a big part in this as well. Like in fact, in one of the accelerator programs that we were part of, there was a company that had built these or that are using these AR, VR, like vision goggles. How is it that you can use that to immerse a patient in an environment where through these immersive technologies, they can improve their health by having sort of these meditation type capabilities, whereby just by being in that environment for a certain period of time with certain frequency, how is it that you can improve their health? So that's an interesting trend to watch out for. And I believe, like sort of personalized healthcare, that's going to be a big trend as well, as to, like typically at least from my perspective, healthcare has been catering towards, hey, what is the majority of the population? What challenges are they running into? So let me have solutions targeting towards the majority of that population, like sort of that 80-20 rule. If 80% of the people are going there, let me invest more time and energy into that and not necessarily focus on the rest of the 20%. Mm-hmm. But how is it that artificial intelligence, machine learning can be used so that you don't have to manually cater towards, let's say, like in this example, towards that 20%, but is there a way that you can use AI ML to not only cater towards that 80%, but also that 20% and provide that personalized care to those patients by using, like AI ML technologies. So that's something I feel is going to change things going forward. Sort of one example that comes to mind from like pharmacy perspective, like given that we are on a pharmacy podcast, is around medication intake. Like there are technologies whereby you can send reminders that, hey, if there's a patient who has to take 3 medications at a certain time frame, you can send them the reminders. But is there a way that you can identify whether a person has taken the medication or not? In fact, that's something that we are currently piloting. That, I talked about the gesture-based detection technology. So if somebody taking a pill and then having that motion of putting it in the mouth and then having water, so that's that entire sequence of steps whereby somebody took the medication. So that coupled with the fact that this person was supposed to take a medication at 12 p.m., let's say. So if they haven't, we can send them a reminder or notification 15 minutes afterwards, and then passively monitor and identify whether did that person take that pill or not. If so, great. So now we are having somebody self-report whether somebody took a pill or not. Is there a passive way of identifying whether a person took that pill or not? So that's another avenue that that I foresee will be big going forward.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, as a pharmacist, I'm always very interested in learning, how the pharmacy sector is being disrupted by all this health technology that's emerging. And I think, obviously, every sector in healthcare requires this disruption because we have been too reliant on the old ways of how we do business. And it just does not necessarily cater to, the challenges that we're seeing today. But what you mentioned about medication management is so important because even we struggle in our day-to-day role, to truly understand whether a patient has actually taken the medication that they were supposed to take. And was it the right medication that they took, right? Because it's not all patients are on just one medication a day. They're at least on an average taking 3 to 4 medications daily. So I think this kind of technology definitely would help Obviously, if we can fine tune it even further and see if we are able to label what those medications that were consumed or what was picked up even, that might help us truly understand, what exactly was the medication? Did they give administer to themselves, or was it an injection, oral pill, etc.? But I think the technology that you have at Somatics would have so much of an impact on that, because you're understanding how gestures are, you're learning how those gestures, like what gestures mean, and then translating that in the future to actions that can be tracked from that point onwards. So I think that's a great one. And just because we were talking about the gesture-based technology, I also wanted to take this opportunity to see if there was any research or any highlights that you wanted to also share about any successes with your ventures at Somatics, and how has it impacted patients' health outcomes in a positive way? If there's anything that you wish to share on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Things I would like to mention is that, we have these predictive analytics capabilities that potentially reduce UTI risk, reduce fall risk, but have we really applied that in a pilot or in a real world setting? And we did, and our data shows that we were able to reduce UTI risk by about 20%, fall risk by about 70%. And in hospital settings, typically, especially in an outpatient setting, the readmissions is a pretty big deal. That if a patient is readmitted within 30 days or 90 days, the hospital has to incur some sort of a penalty. So we also used our technology in that outpatient setting. And we saw that by using our wearables, collecting the data, and so on, we were able to reduce the hospital readmissions by about 17%. So you can just imagine, on an average, the cost that a hospital has to incur through these readmissions is about $15,000. So if we are able to reduce that by 17% for, let's say, on an average, that's a pretty big cost savings for the hospital. So that itself pays for the technology and so on. So these are some of the health outcomes that we have seen. Also, one personal outcome that I would like to share here, especially during these COVID times, was, we provide these apps, a user app, a caretaker app, and also a family app, whereby a person can monitor their loved one's data. So at least during the early times of COVID, in these assisted living, independent living facilities, people weren't allowed to go and visit their loved ones. So by just having this family app, this person could monitor their mother's data. How is she doing? Okay, is she sleeping well? Is she eating well? The number of steps that she's having, is the data looking normal? So through that family app, she was able to at least get that peace of mind that, my mother is doing well, she's been taken care of. So this is where technology really comes to the forefront and really helps in providing that peace of mind to a person. And that's something that really hit home for me, is that moving from a high-tech industry into a health tech space, having that impact through your technology really resonates. And that's something that really was great to hear and get a feel for.
That's awesome. I mean, I think the pandemic has truly revolutionized the way we'll provide healthcare moving forward. And I think technology is here to stay. If anything, as we talked about earlier, it's going to get more integrated into healthcare delivery than it is today. And I thank you so much for sharing that. But I think one concept that I'm always curious to understand and learn about is, every success has its own challenges that were experienced prior to reaching a successful outcome. And given that, you are a growing company, where are some of those barriers or challenges, if you can speak to whatever you may have faced, or also just overall, when you're innovating in healthcare, what were some of the barriers or challenges that you faced as you were innovating this new technology?
Yeah, sure. I'll talk about a couple of broad areas. One was just around adopting the technology. That is, hey, yeah, like we understand smart bands, Fitbits have been, like adopted early, but you're bringing that into a healthcare setting. So what are you going to do with my data?
Yes.
The privacy around the data, that's a big question that these healthcare providers and these patients have, right? So how is it that we can address that? So that was sort of that initial barrier that we had to, overcome. That, okay, so whatever data that we are collecting is encrypted and stored, and even as it traverses from the band to the phone to the cloud, all of that data is encrypted at rest as well as when it's in motion. So that's so we made sure that we followed all of the sort of the compliance related aspects like HIPAA compliance, GDPR, all of these things. So that's something we wanted to make sure that like we follow those, and the encryption of the data, the way the data is stored, anonymize the data, all of these things. And we are also working with big pharma companies, so they have their own like regulatory compliance and governance aspects. So you have to go through all of these security audits. And if anything, going through these audits have helped us even further improve our ways of doing things in terms of managing security and stuff. So that was the first barrier. Then the second barrier from a product perspective that we had was, hey, the commercially available smart bands and smart watches out in the market, the battery life on them isn't that great. They either last for a day or a day and a half. The use case that we are going after is these elderly patients at these nursing home facilities, independent living, assisted living facilities. You cannot expect these elderly patients to charge their bands every day, every night. And if you are doing that, that's the time that you're not collecting the data. So we wanted to make sure that the battery life on these smart bands is at least 3 to 6 days. And that's one of the reasons why, even though we consider ourselves as a software company, we decided to build our own purpose-built smart band. And this smart band has a battery life of about 3 to 6 days. So that's one thing that was initial feedback that we received from these healthcare providers, is that battery life has to be high. It has to be cost effective. So therefore, this is like a simple smart band. It doesn't have a watch or dial, because if it did, then potentially the battery life on that would be lower. So it just has a single button, an emergency button. If somebody needs the care, they can just press that, and it sends an alert notification to their healthcare provider, to the nurse, or the contact center in a home care setting or so. So that was another barrier. Then another one was we wanted to make sure that the adoption and adherence of the smart band is high enough. In fact, the study that I talked about a little while ago, we saw that the adoption and adherence was 90 to 95%. So that itself shows that, and we had gone through 2 or 3 iterations of the band where we improved upon the material of the silicon as well, just to make sure that it is really soft and good enough, especially given that we are going after the elderly citizens. We want to make sure that they will keep the band on, saying that, okay, well, the band is causing some sort of rash, I'm not going to wear it. And then there goes the adoption of the band, right? So we went through multiple iterations of these. So these were sort of some of the challenges that we went through, both from a adoption perspective, technology and product perspective as well.
Thank you. And the reason I ask these questions is because I think there's a lot of healthcare providers who are interested in venturing into or trying to innovate to disrupt the way we provide healthcare, be it taking on technology such as what Somatics provides to further incorporate into their practice to see how they can help their patients better. And I think understanding these barriers also helps, because then you're really understanding how the product came into existence. And I think there's also industry-wide barriers, because healthcare is a very regulated environment, and for right reasons, because patient safety is of paramount in making sure that everything we do, it leads to a safe healthcare provision for our patients. But with that, I think I cannot forget the business part of innovation and technology. And we do know that there's a lot of big players in the market, and who are trying to get into the space as well, like Amazon, Google, Microsoft. These are just a few that I can think of, but like there's many others that are bigger companies. And you had mentioned something earlier on the podcast, how this is still a very new and a fragmented industry, because there's no real leader that has yet been able to capitalize on, because it's just new technology that we're playing with. But how do you see such big corporations entering into health tech? Like, do you see this as a disruption? How does it impact innovation? Because would they then start to control a lot of innovation, and how do we proceed forward with that?
Sure. Yeah, before I answer that question, let me just quickly throw some numbers at you.
Sure.
The global RPM market is about, the last time I checked, is about, $120 billion market. The US market itself is about $73 billion. And if you zoom into that, the wearable market within that is about 13 to 15 billion market. So it's a pretty big market, even if you look at the wearables in the US itself, right? And you rightfully said, all of these big tech giants are entering this space because there is no big leader in this space, in the remote patient monitoring / wearables space as of yet. In fact, if you look at recent mergers and acquisitions, you'll see that Best Buy just recently acquired Current Health. Then there's another wearable company, I can't remember the name, that Best Buy acquired. So there is a lot of M&A activity happening in this space. And one of the reasons why these tech companies, like the Googles, Amazons, Microsofts, of the world, and along with these telco providers as well, like T-Mobile, Verizon, are partnering with other companies to try and get into this particular space, because they also look at this as new markets to go after. Yeah, they have an established customer base, and they are growing within that. But how is it that they can even capture a new market and increase their customer base overall? So the three ways to look at how companies build products or increase their footprint in a certain area is through these build, buy, or partner, right? So these technology companies, the reason why I think that they are on this M&A spree is because, for example, let's take the example of Somatics. We spent, as I said, 5 years just collecting the data, fine-tuning the data, making sure that it works in a real healthcare setting. We have built our patents. So it's not easy for companies to, first of all, to bypass these patents. Like, we have these family of patents around this gesture-based detection technology.
Right.
But that, coupled with the fact that we have this big data collected over a period of 5 to 6 years. So that itself makes the technology really super valuable. Yeah, these big tech giants can put in more resources into building the technology, but not to the point of collecting all of this data. They don't want to enter the space where, or at least I feel like from my point of view, they don't want to get into this environment where they want to work with hospitals, nursing care facilities, do all of these pilots. If there's a way for them to acquire all of that data from somewhere else, bring that in along with what their strong points are in terms of developing the technology, building a platform, making it part of their ecosystem, and they're driving overall growth for them in this new market. So that's sort of the angle or the avenue, the opportunity that these big tech companies see. So more from either a partner perspective or acquire M&A perspective, not necessarily build, because the building is going to take time as well, right? So maybe at that point, the market may have shifted somewhere else. Sort of that market share, the grab for that market share, somebody else may have already grabbed some, like some of that market share. So that's the reason why I see more so of these M&A activity, these partnership activities happening more.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it's always interesting to see, and I think I always believe that innovation requires a lot more hands. It shouldn't always be consolidated, because consolidation negatively impacts innovation. And then that was just one of the reasons why I had asked that question, is because, I think right now, because we're in such an infancy of health tech, that we want all innovation to have that chance to prosper and be able to prove, what it's set out to prove, and just making sure that, we're not consolidating that because of this need to like a gold rush to innovation. Because sometimes that's how you see it, because there's just so many small companies coming up. And I think I have to commend you, because not every company will take that time, those 5 years, to truly wait, collect data, analyze, and then take it to a product that's ready for the customer. Because I think right now there's this whole, what I would call is a gold rush to innovation, where everyone's trying to just get their hands into the market, put it on, get something out into the market to say, hey, I'm creating this, right? So that was just that was the reason why I had asked that question. And I think as we're wrapping up this interview, because you have shared some amazing insights, I think from health tech to business perspective, and it goes to show the knowledge that you have. And I do know that you're a mentor yourself, and I'm certain that the audience who are listening to this podcast, a lot of them are pharmacy students as well, will truly benefit from the insights that you've shared. Do you have a piece of advice for healthcare professionals who are looking to enter into the world of health tech and innovate, like any resources or any advice you could share for them?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the one thing I'll talk about is, like technology is disrupting other industries and moving into other spaces. So as you're learning new things in school, colleges, universities, always look out for opportunities in terms of sort of keep your minds open, if you will, in terms of finding those opportunities. Where do you think technology can enable things? Because it's certain industry, you can sort of innovate and get to a point where sort of that innovation curve, if you will, like flattens out, right? But maybe that same technology can potentially be applied into a new industry, into a new use case, right? Now, for example, AI/ML, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it has been working great in the high-tech industry. It has been, like, we have been at it for quite some time, but now just applying the same methodologies into the health tech space, right? So basically, moving from invention to innovation in different industries. So there's always look for synergies in different industries and find for those opportunities. And that's where having that entrepreneurial mindset really comes into play. So, and for that, be open to new things. So I personally have been very interested, like recently into crypto, into the crypto economy, not necessarily from a Bitcoin perspective, but the underlying technology, blockchain. How is that, like all of the things that we sort of the buzzwords that we hear today, smart contracts, Web3, how is that going to change things, right? So, So get used to those terms, understand that at a deeper level, and see the area, the industry that you are in. How do you think these building blocks can potentially disrupt? And this is where hopefully you would be able to find some disruptive area to focus on and maybe build your own startup in that space.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Definitely. I think, and I think that has always been a challenge. I mean, and I can speak to myself for this for sure, because as a healthcare provider, especially, when my focus and my training has been so focused and structured on the medications aspect of it, sometimes it is difficult for me to take a step away from it, because I'm like, no, this is my territory. This is where I feel comfortable, right? So I totally resonate with what you mentioned about like exploring your horizons and seeing, how can you take best practices and what is working for one industry, and seeing how you can, then take it to somewhere else and create a better opportunity in that sector as well. Why not? If it's working for this one, see if there's a use case for the other sector as well. So thank you for
Absolutely. Just having that big picture mindset, that, okay, you know what, this is all that is happening in today's world, not just necessarily in health tech, healthcare, but across industries. So how is it that you can bring all of those bits and pieces, sort of those Lego blocks, if you will, and then build your own company or something using those Lego blocks, these pieces of technology for a greater cause, for a bigger cause.
Couldn't have said it better. Couldn't have said it better. You have given us some really some really good thoughts that I'll definitely be quoting you on, because you have truly shared such immense wisdom. I'm truly inspired, and I think you have definitely motivated me to kind of think outside the box and learn about these different technologies that are out there. Not just technologies, but just the different concepts that are floating around in the world. I think one of the interesting ones that I was just reading today, I think that Facebook and Instagram are thinking of starting their own coin currency of some sort. So that, I was like, how does this translate into the bigger picture? So it might be something that we can come back and talk about on another date and time. But as we're running out of time, I did want to, kind of ask my last question to you, and this is just to kind of help us wrap this conversation, because you've shared such immense insights. But as a leader in health tech, what do you see as the long-term, where do you see us going like 5 to 10 years from now in terms of how we provide healthcare to our patients?
Yeah. I think remote monitoring is going to be huge, and I'm not biased. Like telemedicine. Telemedicine, and then just having moving from reactive to preventative care, and from preventative care to outcomes. I think this is where I would like to see healthcare move towards, and I think we are definitely moving in the right direction, on that front. And and technology already has been an enabler on that front. How is it that we can further improve upon that? I think that's where we'll see sort of healthcare move into that space. Like AR, VR, AI, ML already being used. I would love to see how Web3 and blockchain can be part of healthcare. The one thing that comes to mind is around data ownership. Like today, our data is sprawled across everywhere, right? Now, let's say if you're doing a credit card transaction, just purely to establish trust, you have to provide all of your information just to know that, yes, I am Amit Sawant. This is my address. This is my whatever, my personal information. And then once that's done, then the transaction happens, right? But what happens to the data that's which I don't have ownership? The credit card company has ownership of that. So just imagine this in a healthcare setting, right? That's even more intrusive. So how is it that you can have technology, especially Web3, where you're decentralizing things, so that I can have ownership of my data? I can have some way to provide only the data that you need, not necessarily all of the data, which you may only need some subset of the data, right? So how is it that Web3, crypto, blockchain can be an enabler so that I can be the owner of my healthcare, of my health data? So that's another thing I would love to see in the next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, patient ownership of data has always been a contentious issue and an issue of concern. And, obviously it's because we have just not had a good understanding of what happens to the data, once it's being collected. And I think it would be great for us to reconnect over a second conversation, part 2 of our conversation to, discuss that in the future. But with that,
absolutely.
I'm going to wrap this up because I do know that we are running out of time, but at the same time, I think this conversation has been so insightful for me, especially because I've learned so much, not just from the technology point of view, but also from the business aspect of it. And I think it goes to show the caliber of a leader that you are and the knowledge that you have about this. And I wish you all the best with Somatics. I do know that there's a few interesting things that are coming up in the near future, and I wish you best as you are moving forward with the company and looking forward to see what the company has to offer to our patients in the very near future.
Thank you, Aska. It has been a pleasure being on your podcast. I would love to come back again. Once again, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right, with that, we're going to end this conversation right here. Thank you, Dr. Sawant, for the time and the commitment to having this conversation with me. And with that, stay tuned for our next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.